The recent wave of mass protests in Slovakia, drawing tens of thousands onto the streets, directly follows Prime Minister Robert Fico's controversial December meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow. These demonstrations, the largest the country has witnessed since Fico's return to power in 2023, represent a significant challenge to his government and its increasingly pro-Russia stance. Friday's protests alone saw an estimated 60,000 people converge on the capital, Bratislava, while nationwide rallies swelled to approximately 100,000 participants, underscoring the depth of public discontent. The clandestine nature of Fico's Moscow trip has fueled much of the criticism. Opponents argue that the meeting, shrouded in secrecy, symbolizes a dangerous shift in Slovakia's foreign policy trajectory, pulling the nation away from its traditional alliances within the European Union, EU, and NATO, and toward closer ties with Russia. This alleged realignment, critics contend, is not merely a change in diplomatic approach, but a fundamental weakening of democratic values and institutions within Slovakia. The accusations extend beyond a simple foreign policy recalibration. They paint a picture of a government actively undermining democratic principles in its pursuit of closer relations with Russia. The scale and intensity of the protests suggest a widespread belief that Fico's government is prioritizing its relationship with Russia over the interests and values of the Slovakian people and its established international partnerships. Furthermore, the protests are not solely a reaction to Fico's meeting with Putin. They represent a culmination of growing anxieties about the government's overall direction. The perceived erosion of democratic norms, coupled with the increasingly assertive foreign policy shift towards Russia, has created a climate of deep uncertainty and public outrage. Many fear that Fico's government, through its actions, is jeopardizing Slovakia's long-standing commitment to the principles of democracy, transparency, and the rule of law, all core tenets of its EU and NATO memberships. The sheer number of protesters demonstrates the widespread alarm over this perceived trajectory. Fico, however, remains defiant in the face of mounting pressure. He vehemently rejects calls for his resignation, defending his government's foreign policy as a pragmatic pursuit of good relations with all nations, including Russia. While acknowledging criticism of certain EU policies, he insists that Slovakia's commitment to the EU and NATO remains steadfast, and that its policy decisions are firmly rooted within the framework of these alliances. This assertion, however, fails to assuage the concerns of protesters who see the clandestine meeting and the overall foreign policy shift as evidence of a gradual, yet significant, departure from these fundamental alliances and the democratic principles they uphold. The discrepancy between Fico's assurances and the palpable public anxiety underscores the profound political crisis facing Slovakia. The future stability of the country hinges on resolving this deep-seated conflict of interests and restoring public confidence in its government's commitment to democratic values and its long-standing international partnerships.